a piping project. That's the basics of what the canal company is. We have two projects going on right now. One of them is the focus of this meeting, which is to pipe the upper part of the ditch, and we'll get into why we're doing it and why we're doing it now during this meeting. We also have a second project going on. It's going to back up a little bit and give you some background on that, because what I've heard is there's some confusion in the community between the two projects. These are two separate projects. The one project with the piping is being organized and focused by Okanogan Conservation District. The second project is with the Department of Ecology. It's with the Department of Ecology.
You didn't turn it off.
Oh, I turned it off.
It was on.
It was on. So the second project is with the Department of Ecology. The ecology came to the Chewuch Canal Company several years ago and asked if we would help them try to locate a source of water which they could use, or what they call retime, for municipal purposes. They had for years trying to find additional water for the municipalities in the valley. They asked the Chewuch Canal Company, who was headed by Roger Rowe, whether the Chewuch Canal Company would be interested in giving up one of our 5 feet of our reservoir. And we were not. The shareholders and Roger were not interested in giving up that reservoir in Pearrygin Lake. Roger came up with a brilliant idea of saying, well, why don't we create a 6-foot reservoir in Pearrygin Lake? And then you can use that, retime it, and I can get into timing this, but retime it so that it can then be used by a municipality in the valley to help with concentrating growth in the towns. And that's the basic overview of what that project is about. Roger, along with a man by the name of John Hurt, secured a grant of around $200,000 to put in the infrastructure in the 6th foot of Pearrygin Lake, put in a siphon at the bottom of the 6th foot, drain the lake in the off irrigation seasons down to where that 6th foot was. Then in the spring, put water down the open ditch, the open canal, filled the lake back up again, showed that it could be done within this pilot project showed that it could be done in approximately 50 days. We could fill the lake back up. 160 acre feet for the 6th foot, and then the rest of it for our own use as irrigation water. Based on that, we have gone ahead, and the canal company has made agreements to talk with the town, because they have town of Winter. They have expressed interest in using that new reservoir, if it ever does exist, for their town purposes, so that they can keep growth in town and have the amount of water and build it out and try to keep growth concentrated within the town. So that's the concept that's going on. The CCC will not get any additional water from working on this diversion project. So what we need to do in order to create that reservoir, we need a permit from the Department of Ecology to divert the water from new water from the Chewuch Canal Company outside of our irrigation window. And then another permit to have that water create a reservoir. So there's a reservoir permit, a diversion permit. If the town will then have to get a permit to take the water out of the reservoir. It will be their water. And then they will have to spill that water down Lake Creek, which is the outlet of Pearrygin Lake that flows into the Chewuch River on a 12-month out of the year basis. Roger did that in his experiment, his pilot project. He showed that that could be done. For 12 months out of the year, that water can be released from the reservoir, and it turns it from irrigation water into municipal water. It can get retimed as long as it's moving out 12 months out of the year. They will then also have to get another permit to withdraw that water once it's in the river system, in Chewuch and Methow, to draw it out for them to use for municipal purposes. That's the skeleton outline of what needs to be done. We are in discussions right now of trying to get the details of all of that worked out. We're in discussions with the CCC, the Colvilles will also be part of the discussion as of currently as the town of Winthrop and the Department of Ecology are all at this point still in discussions of working out whether this can actually happen, under what conditions, and so forth and so on. So that's where that is. That is completely separate from the piping project. So we get no additional water from or water rights from this project to divert the water for municipal purposes, and we're selling the water. The CCC, either of these projects, is not selling water. Nothing changed. So that's basically it separates from these two projects.
Okay. Well, thank you, Casey, for the introduction and the description of the Chewuch Canal. As Craig said, my name is Jordana Ellis. I am the project manager for this project that we're working together with the CCC. And I wanted to go over just the general outline of what we're proposing for the project. So as I said, I work for the Okanogan Conservation District. For those of you that don't know what the Conservation District is, we are a government agency, and working with us is completely voluntary. We are non-regulatory, and we help people with their conservation goals on their land. So Casey already kind of went over for you what the Chewuch Canal is. They are a irrigation ditch company that supplies to over 175 shareholders. Some of those users are agricultural, tribe, state, residential, and recreational. They have about a little over 1,000 irrigated acres and over 12,000 allocated shares. Let's see what my next thing here. The ditch completely stretches from just at the diversion of the Chewuch River, which is, I don't know if you can see on this map or on that map, it's all the way up right to where Chewuch Road joins the West Side Road. So at that little area up there near the Forest Service. And it stretches, this first portion that we're discussing stretches down to Pearrygin Lake. And then the piped portion goes from Pearrygin Lake all the way down to just above the jump face. Oops. Okay. Yes. Apologies. So this was a discussion a lot of people had, is why do we even need to do this? The infrastructure is starting to fail. If you can see on here, two of these pictures are culverts that are degrading and filling up. Then also over here on the bottom, you can see this material in the bottom left that is an old lining that is starting to deteriorate. Some people have said, why don't we just line the ditch? That is more of a Band-Aid on a lot of this. Lining a ditch, it lasts maybe about 10 years, and then it starts to degrade and becomes its own problem. So that is something that they've tried to help ease the leakage, but it's not a permanent solution. And another reason that they need to do this is because mainly they want to reduce their seepage loss. They want to reduce their liability of damage. If after the last fires, a lot of this seepage increased because we lost a lot of the plants that were basically the root balls that were tying the ditch together. A lot of that stuff got lost in the fire. And when you lose a lot of that structure, you can potentially lose and have a washout. So there's a liability of that. And if that were to wash out, CCC would be liable. And then they also have in their water management and conservation plan, they have listed out goals to improve delivery system efficiency, improve reliability and accuracy of flow regulation structures, and to educate water users. So this is not only something that they're doing to try to ensure water security, it's also in line with their management goals. The project that we laid out is to pipe that upper 5.3 miles. It would be a non-pressurized system providing 2.5 feet per second flow velocity. And we would like to try to pipe in the existing ditch line. The delivery will be 15 cubic feet per second. Each shareholder will receive a turnout. There'll be a turnout provided at each location where there currently is a turnout, and we'll be walking that line with each landowner and the shareholders. And if they want their turnout to be in a different location, that's up for discussion. There'll be 10 road crossings, and it will connect through the Dempsey drop to the Silver Line screen. A lot of people are worried about the habitat loss and destruction and what it's going to look like afterwards. It is going to get some trees cut down within the easement that they have. They will need to clear some material. Things that we're proposing and are going to try to work into the design is that if it's a mature pine tree and it's far enough back from the cut scar, if it can be left, we're going to try to leave it. And a lot of the cottonwoods aren't going to survive. So anything that's in the easement that is a cottonwood will probably be cut down. We're also going to go in afterwards and reseed with either native grasses or pollinator mix or both, depending on what the site specifically would do best with or what the landowner would like to see. We'd like to also try to work into the plan providing trees, bushes, native species only that would do well in that site to the landowners who are losing some trees for them to plant outside the easement on their own property. And so the reason that we're doing this really is to create a stable, secure delivery system to supply to water users in the Methow Valley. And the water saved from improving the efficiency of the delivery system will be a 17 CFS cubic feet per second return to in-stream flow. And that will help support salmon and other habitat within the water, within the river system. So now we were going to move on to the panel discussion where we're going to go over some of the frequently asked questions that we didn't really cover in the presentation. So on the panel, we have me and Casey, and we also have, I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves, I think, but I'm just going to say their names. Craig Boesel, Charles Brushwood from the Tribe, Tyson Carlson from Aspect Consulting, Kelsey Collins from the Trust Water Right Coordinator at the Department of Ecology, and Megan, am I going to say your name right? Hernan, okay, from the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Okay, and I'm going to turn it over to Craig. He's going to run the panel for us. Oh, I'm going to have to hand it around.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay.
I'm gonna see if I can make this one work. All right, so, and then you probably saw this list of questions we heard directly, anticipated, et cetera. We're gonna kind of march through those. A few of them, I think you guys have certainly brushed upon, but just maybe get some very direct, succinct answers. So you talked a little bit here, both of you did, about why it's necessary to pipe the ditch. So I'm going to add one word to that and say, why is it necessary to pipe the ditch now? Who wants to answer that? Ready, set, go.
Okay, the upper part of the ditch. Up by the edge gate, the other side. Go down, pull it down, pull it branch, it was leaking significantly. It was leaking, and we were close to having control of it. That's just one part that is needed. Serious work. Miners, they don't last good. They get sucked in the winter, they get really put into them and pregnant. The better thing is to get efficiency put in now in the hiking project. We have the opportunity to get funding for it. And so we decided shareholders voted it out. Approved this in the February 23 meeting. It was overwhelming. All the shares that were represented there, about 6,900, all but 115 approved it, and 50 shares abstained. So it's something that has been discussed with the shareholders, and they're behind it. Anything else? Absolutely. I think it down.
Okay, so Jordana, this might be best for you. What's the time?
In the planning phase right now, we're still gathering information. Our engineers have come up with a temporary design, a concept, and now they're also trying to gather the rest of the information to do their final design. So as soon as we get that final design, we'll be able to apply for the funding to do the implementation part. We're hoping everything's lined up and work out to start the implementation July 2025.
And any idea, have they said anything about how long they think it might take?
They haven't. I think we need to have the final design first. There's a possibility that we might need to phase the installation and do a certain section so that we don't lose any of the irrigation season.
Okay. How do they calculate the safe water?
I think that might be better for Casey. I know that Roger did a study. They're also used a lot of the hydrogeology papers from the USGS. And there was another company that they used, Casey was there, that was
Right now, we divert in round somewhere between 26 and 29 CFS out of the hole right now. And if we pipe it, we'll save half of that. So roughly 15 CFS. And we calculated that that's enough for the upper ditch shareholders to get the water that they are entitled to as being shareholders. Each share is worth 1 gallon. So share. So we went through the calculation, figured 15 CFS would do that. It also is basically what we did in the pilot project to create this reservoir potentially in the town of Winthrop with its water problems. So both would be covered by 15 CFS. The remaining 17 CFS would then go to trust. Part of the project and findings.
Okay. All right, Kelsey, you're up. Here we go. What's going to happen to save water and who owns it?
The part where John should be in this seat, but got instead. So I can tell the protocol transfer that save water to the stream and legally assign it to the river, and then what will happen and how the permitting works. But exactly who I don't know, is that funding coming from the Conservation Commission or ecology? Okay. Okay, so if the commission is paying for that saved water, then it's essentially, they would, at the point at which it's ready to be transferred into the stream and legally, the place of use is changed to the stream for the future use of Winthrop or whoever the end user is. So then that conveyance, there would be a deed actually. Right, so it's non-consumptive. Yeah, sorry. Thank you for that. So the savings still part of a water, correct? As every drop in the river is spoken for. So for the river to actually have that savings available to the town of Winthrop, we actually have to legally transfer. Okay, see now, this is where you should John Kirk. Okay, so the savings though is still in the river, correct? Right, but it's non-consumptive. It's just staying in the river. Right, but to stay in the river, we still earmark it as a trust water. Yes, and I apologize. Right, okay. See, even yeah. How many days ago did we talk? And I already forgot. Okay, so if I forget, they're gonna forget. So I apologize. Two separate projects. The savings from the piping only. Yes. 17 CFS that used to be lost through seepage will be assigned to the river and just stay there. Bingo. Okay. So then if we have questions about the other, too bad, because Casey will kill me. I screwed that up here. Perfect. Well, you can call me when that comes down. Perfect. So yeah, just the savings still though, because it was historically diverted by the canal company, it will still be deeded. But it's only savings, it's only seepage loss. And the reason that we have to take ownership of that is so that if there were illegal diverters, we could show that water is legally assigned. Yes. Okay, good. Sorry.
So maybe Pearrygin wants to take on this next one about the expected project in-stream flow benefits.
I can go ahead and take a crack, and then turn it over to Megan to see if she has anything to add. Again, my name is Chuck Brushwood. I work for the Colville tribes and their Fish and Wildlife Program. Just a brief aside on that. So the Methow tribe, the original people of this valley, are a constituent tribe of the Colville Confederacy. And the Colville tribes have a habitat improvement project targeted at improving habitat conditions for anadromous fish throughout the Upper Columbia, specifically here in the Methow. And my colleague, Dave Chewuch, in the back, my name, works with us to implement habitat projects. So, of course, fish need water. They both need water that's available in quantity, but water that's full, clean, clear, and connected. Water quantity is limited in many areas in Columbia and the Methow and its tributaries. And so, we're, the Colville tribes are a shareholder, Chewuch Canal, named the former Wagner Ranch. Most of you all are familiar with. The tribes call in their language Okanogan property. So we're an interested party in that. The Colville tribes have a habitat project whose aim is and our aim through that project is to improve habitat conditions for fish and other aquatic life in the Methow and its tributaries. We also are a potential cost share partner for the project if funding is needed. Had some conversations with Casey and others about the potential of being a cost share partner if additional funding is needed. But long story short, fish need water to the extent that additional water that was lost to the system through seepage can be restored in stream or not diverted, while at the same time ensuring that irrigators and other water users get the water that they need. That is an outcome that we'd like to support. So just using, for the sake of argument, 17 CFS additional entry flow in the Chewuch River during the irrigation season. That's a pretty significant additional amount of water that could address habitat limiting factors, both in terms of water quality and water quantity, in terms of ensuring whole clean water for fish. And so we're continuing to work with Irrigation District, Chewuch Canal Company, to explore options to potentially support the project, to learn more about it, and to ensure that there's a project benefit not only for fish, but to ensure that irrigators and Chewuch Canal Company shareholders get the water that they need, particularly in light of increased drought frequency and severity. Finding opportunities to increase efficiency for these irrigation conveyance systems is a good way to ensure that everyone gets the water that they need. Fish get the water that they need. Farmers, other water users get the water that they need in a way that's not zero sum. It's not fish versus farms. It's not fish versus water users. It's how can we find a way so everyone gets the water they need, everyone benefits. So that's my spiel. Megan, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Spiel. Megan Kernan with the Department of Fish and Wildlife. If Kelsey is 3 days new to this project, I think I'm one. I'm hearing it mostly for the first time right now, but I echo that what Chuck is saying about fish needing water. Looking forward to hearing more about the in-stream benefit. And also we'll just toss out this notion of climate resiliency. The climate change projections are such that in the Methow River, there's an expectation that the flows will be lower in the summer. And so finding opportunities like this that potentially can put some water back in stream will be incredibly valuable for fish and aquatic species. And we're looking for this project.
Good evening, everybody. Tyson Carlson, Aspect Consulting. I'm a hydrogeologist by training. I think the question was, what does 17 CFS do for, in addition to the habitat, I think of it as the 17 CFS remain in stream instead of partially getting diverted, and then it kind of get lost incrementally of the canal. What it means is the entire CFS remains in the river from the diversion down. What that can do is that can obviously raise water levels in the stream, which depending on the time of year, can help with aquifer recharge. Kind of the analogy is filling the sponge of the aquifer, so that way during times of low flow, the water is available to discharge and support in-stream flows. During the late summers.
All right. Yeah. Okay, awesome.
So now that I'm on track as to which project. One thing that we do hear a lot is that these conservation projects, there's concerns that when the savings, so just that leakage, the non-consumptive portion, after all of this, the savings the project is built out, that the transfer of that to the river is strictly I guess, what's the best word? Scrutinized to make sure that that portion, the savings only, can be transferred to the river, that it won't impair anyone, that it is a valid water right. All of those concerns that folks, the whole looking under the hood and having used it in the last 5 years, the difficulty of transferring a water right. That is absolutely not part of this. Water conservation has a carve out in the law such that that portion is looked at basically in a vacuum. Is that water physically there? Will it impair anyone if we put it in the river? That's a pretty obvious no. Is it being put to a beneficial use? Absolutely. So any concerns that someone would have about the transfer process or ecology in, use it or lose it or looking under the hood, that is not a part of this because there's.
So. This one there. Yeah, so who's? The current system habitat ditch, they destroyed. Some prior experience there, regulates. He was trying to avoid eye contact there, I could tell.
Along the ditch. Started piping. We actually looked at piping the whole thing to do. We ended up doing it in sections. I can tell you some of the things not to do that didn't work. For this question, will it affect the habitat along the canal? Obviously. It's hard to predict 100% what tree is going to live and what tree is going to die, but I can give you some general ideas. Virtually all we're talking is going to we only got through the shareholders to vote for piping it up to Pearrygin Lake. They would not pass piping it above that for different reasons, which I can tell you. So as we did that piping, what we learned, and they were all the same concerns that we would have here. We're going to have concerns about, well, the house is right here. It had these cottonwoods, quite enhancements, and these pine trees in the backyard of the argument. I understand that. It is a concern. Another one for those people that have wells. In fact, my well, who's responsible? All of those questions are good questions. And you get into a situation where the Chewuch has a certain width of easement. You're going to get into a situation where some places it's going to be difficult to leave a cottonwood, even if you want to water it. If the cottonwood ever comes out, some of those are really big trees. They have lots of roots. And if they're very close underneath the ditch, they can take that height. Right. And that, I'm not saying what you should or shouldn't do, I'm just telling you what can happen. Because we did that for years. Surprising, some of the quake enhancement thickets actually will survive. There again, it's just they were supplemented from the Chewuch and how much they're supplemented from the springs. As you probably have in case we can better speak to that tonight. We talked about different ways of drip. Pros and cons of that. Where was the water going to come from? Whose water rights? Who's going to control the company? There was, here again, we did, as not what Casey or what's planned. We gave at that time the option for some people to say, well, I don't want that tree cut. He took responsibility for that tree. If it come over or took the pipe out, then it was going to be them. If they were watered, it was their responsibility. But that's even an option. Just telling you. Saying that was good, bad, right? That's what we
One of the things that was discussed and alluded to here was that shareholders can use their water to water their easement water trees that they want to save. They don't need to be taken out for structural purposes of engineering that pipe. You can go, I don't know if you guys know where Kitten Plain is. And if you see on that side, the east side of the East Chewuch Road, from there down to Size Alley, right where my property against the town line, you'll see that there's cotton. It's all in there. And those shareholders use their water, put in sprinkler systems on timers and water those trees. And so it's an example that yes, those trees can exist. Most people don't, see that there's even pipe there. So I just want to point that out, that there is, on the ground use that actually did work after the pipe was.
Second,
Okay, the only thing that I would add is, my general experience with irrigation efficiencies projects. Colville tribes, since I've been with the Fish and Wildlife Program for about 15.5 years, I've been involved in a number of irrigation efficiencies projects with irrigation districts, private irrigators, and an important principle in any of these projects is they're willing participant projects. When we work with irrigators to find efficiencies, they're not forced to work with us. They work with us because oftentimes they derive a benefit. And we work with irrigators and water users to try to figure out a way that they can benefit from a project, specifically in the case of an efficiency. And this is a brief diversion. I apologize, but I will get to a point, I promise. And this will get to the habitat and ways to potentially mitigate for lost riparian habitat with the dig piping project. An important principle in getting an agreement with the water user efficiencies project, make sure that the water user or irrigator benefits by having more reliable irrigation ways infrastructure, getting modernized infrastructure that meets their needs, as opposed to an open ditch, leaky ditch that can become, as Casey well knows, a management challenge. And so, I think in terms of Colville's approach to this project and any project, any habitat project, not just any irrigation efficiencies project, is when we're involved as a project funder, when we're working with willing project participants, we try to find a way to meet their needs. And to the extent that Colville is involved in this project going forward, to the extent that individual water users or landowners whose property may be affected or viewshed may be affected by this project, certainly we would want to make sure that we work with Canal Company, Irrigation District, and others to make sure that to the extent that it's possible, we're helping to meet everyone's needs in the project. That's the only thing that I have to add.
Okay, so let's get maybe a little bit more specific benefits to fish and wildlife from this project within the watershed.
You skipped it.
I'm basing it off of a question that we've got over here online, so I'm getting there. So, but it's tied into this, so I just figured it, stay on the same subject of, that what specifically are wildlife habitat benefits.
I work on a variety of different issues. I'm not sure that I can speak to potential wildlife benefits of the project and getting additional 17 CFS in the Chewuch River and keeping that water in stream during the irrigation season, other than just to observe that not only fish benefit from water in stream, fish and other aquatic life. Terrestrial species obviously need water as well. We all need water. And so, terrestrial species utilize the river, water, how populations might interact with increased stream flow in Chewuch resulting from the project. Can't necessarily say regarding, specific, fish habitat limiting factors and potential benefits. We do have a couple of subject matter experts out in the audience who might be able to speak, to that specifically in a way that, they are better suited to answer those specific anticipated project benefits for fish populations, probably than I can, but I'll just leave that there and see, Megan, do you have anything that you'd want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think Chuck's original statement about what project benefits are hold true. I don't know if there's any greater detail or specificity I can add, and I'll just reiterate that when you have more water in stream, you have more available habitat for the aquatic species that are in stream. There's the potential to water up side channels and areas, keep fish passage happening by adding that additional water in stream. I think Chuck mentioned that there's potentially a temperature benefit when you have more water that can buffer the higher temperatures that we've seen in the summertime with respect to the in-stream water temperatures. There's also an increase in dissolved oxygen when you're able to keep those water temperatures cooler. These are components that are requirements for cold water fishes. Trying to think of what else sort of specificity might be lacking. I mean, I think the project benefits 17 CFS sounds really great. I think we want to know a little bit more detail before we can start talking with specificity, about what that actually looks like from an ecological perspective. But the things that I think both Chuck and I have covered are basically the sideboards with which we would expect to see some benefit.
So Jordana is a project manager. What are the plans for minimizing impacts to habitat during project implementation?
As we discussed before, some of the suggestions that we've had are that we are going to try to leave the trees that we can leave that will be able to survive and that will be far enough away to not cause problem type. We will also take under consideration the suggestion to leave some of the ones that are going to be killed as snags for wildlife habitat. We also are going to make sure we come in afterwards and reseed with those native plants and grasses that will be able to encourage browsing for habitat for wildlife, and also maybe possibly pollinator plants where we can feel like the habitat will support that to encourage some insect species.
To speak to, if you have the easement as a 50-foot wide easement, lots of disturbance, that's a really wide area. And then within that, it's not just trees. I mean, there's shrubs, there's serviceberry and snowberry, there's native shrubs that have been there, doing their thing, irrespective of the canal. So
some of that will have to go so that they can get the equipment in there. Even if we did leave it, it could possibly get torn up on the way through. It would be, personally, in my personal opinion, it would be better to cut it instead of damage it, possibly, and then try to replant outside the easement. So we could provide inside the budget some funding for replanting of native plants of that type, of that habitat, and to improve that. But some of that will have to go, and then as we pull that stuff, we'll either chip on site or haul off and remove it and ship it somewhere else, whatever is most feasible at that.
But I mean, if the easement's 50-foot wide, are you thinking like that is all cleared? Or I mean, when you say outside of the easement for planting native shrubs.
I don't know, the easement belongs to the Chewuch Canal, so it would be up to them to determine if anything is allowed to be planted back in it. But things will definitely come in on their own. Then that would be probably something to discuss in the final design.
I'm going to take that sort of CJ grad real quick. You can just say that any contract that we let for this type of soil surveying practice, we require that the area be at the bare minimum reseeded in grass or something else to prevent erosion. There'll often be other things that we look at to make sure that it doesn't become a weed patch or anything like that. So that would be a bare minimum if we're going to be involved to make sure that there isn't future problems and everything. So.
The approach that the canal company is going to take to this is that we need to sit down with each shareholder, walk their property, get them to point out what's important to them, what they want to try to save, match that against the engineering reports that we have at that particular point. Hopefully we'll have an engineer with us that can answer questions, and we'll tailor it to each individual shareholder's property to try to minimize the impact that piping and ditching. That's the only thing that I can really say, is that we're approaching it from that standpoint. Some of you know me, some of you don't, but I don't usually approach things in a confrontation. I try to work with people. I try to come and cooperate with people and come to some solution where the problem is solved that is brought up between the parties. And that's the way we're going to approach it, both by a company and me personally, representing that company and my fiduciary duties. So I'm optimistic that we will learn from past piping projects in the back. And we'll try to make this one have the least impact possible and still get that pipe in the ground and save it. That's the best way I can go through with it. And we'll just go from there. We'll work with the shareholders one by one, looking down, and make sure that we're doing all we can.
Areas that have the most sensitive habitat, which there are many, so that's in the eastern part of the road. Why do we have to bury the pipe? We just laid it down in existing trench. That would alleviate the need to kill all the trees and shrubs that are right on the ditch line. There's 89-year-old service berries, choke cherries, beautiful progresses. Why don't we just lay it down? Think of the Alaskan pipeline. It's all above ground. Okay.
That's an engineering question. I don't have the answer to that.
It would save a ton of money on bulldozing, a lot of destruction, and we could put a fund together. I'd be happy to help fund that. If a pipe. That's what I'm doing.
The engineers aren't here, but we can definitely pose that question to them. The only things that I would think of would be a pipe above ground would be more susceptible to the environment, would be more susceptible to degradation, deterioration. But it is something that we can mention to the engineers to scope out. As I said, we're still in the planning phase. We're still determining what projects work. Craig, do you have any comment on what the above ground pipe?
I haven't seen some. There's going to be a decision what that I see.
there's going to be PVC, whether there's going to be a middle pipe. Section welded, name of what kind it is. We buried ours at that time, different years that we did it. I understand your question, I believe and understand the concern. We buried it because we believed that we had been told that it would be safer in the future if it was underground. It would be less likely if in those places where we put PVC or some type of plastic pipe, or it would be less likely it could get cracked for a tree falling or something. That was the first thing I would. With last impacts where the trees go. They be an engineer. If they just thought it was safer.
So again, taking facilitator head, just being around piping projects in the past, depends on the type of pipe. If it is, certainly if it is, as Craig was saying, if it is plastic or PVC, I don't know the exact numbers. We've worked a lot with the Federal Natural Resources Conservation Service, and they have design specs for large irrigation projects. And plastic or PVC pipe that's buried roughly, the lifespan is roughly twice as long as if it's on top. So there is a life expectancy that would be diminished if sections of it are plastic or PVC. So it's just part of just kind of the overall consideration. And as Jordana said, the engineers haven't finished the design yet. Certainly throw that question to them. What would it look like and what would be the different ramifications of buried versus not?
What kind of pipe was buried? Plastic or?
It's PVC. So,
And just to tack on to what Craig said, those NRCS standards are what we have to follow, and they do have specifications listed down. In order to actually qualify for the funding, we have to follow those specifications. So there are parameters that we have to stay within to be able to move forward with the project.
Another thing if we just type to Barkley, and realize people here are Chewuch, you could care less about Barkley. You understand that. But it is still a piping project. We put several like straight for you. It was something chosen by the funders. They're bad. That's what we did. Going back to another question that came up, the comment was, and we ended up seeding that as those people in that field showed we should seed it. And if it didn't take well, we came back and seeded it another year. Some places we did 2 years ago to get a stand. One way or another, but those projects are reseeded.
Okay, just talk about this a little bit. And I'll just ask if you have anything else you want to add about including a plan for valves in the pipe, to allow soaker hoses or other types of watering for stands of trees that are not in the way of the pipe. This would be a request in addition to our irrigation outtakes.
Each shareholder gets one, which you currently have. How you use that water, whether you want to put soaker hoses on it, or you don't want to put soaker hoses on it, if you want to do what you're doing now with it, water pastures, that's up to the shareholder. The Canal Company's own responsibility is to get the water to the point. What you do with that water, as long as it's for beneficial use, irrigation use, it's up to me. It's up to the individual.
The diameter of my diversion depends upon the number of shares.
Yes, it's fitted to the number of shares that you metered. No, there's no mean, the water is measured at the. Measure, as it's still changing.
So just to clarify, if you didn't hear that question, it was if the individual diversion size is adjusted based on the shares that the individual has, and the answer was yes.
And we'll work with the shareholders to set up the soaking hoses and help them, figure that out, how to do it. That's the way of doing that. You give the people up there to talk to them. We're not just gonna say, oh, that's it, see ya, we'll get people who have done it before, in the valley, who have experience. We figure it. Sure.
Jump back just a minute.
Yeah, absolutely.
So 17 CFS, if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying that's the estimate of the amount of seepage.
Yes, that's about the loss.
50%.
Yeah, that's about, that's the basic rule of thumb that we.
And did you talk about, I'm sure you have thought about the late season recharge that seepage may or may not provide to the Chewuch?
To the Chewuch River itself.
Yeah.
I don't know, Craig, been talking about that. You've had this question before, you've had experience with it.
I like the expression of this fade.
Heard that question before. Good question. One of the questions that came up, I've got tossed around every time. Type something, and tell you the truth, that was one of the reasons I believe the shareholders voted not to do the upper part. Is it because people here, I've done it for so many years, I have a tendency to know what the Chewuch River is every day since it was important to us, and to the Chewuch it still is. And so when you talk about 17 CFS, that is a significant number. Chewuch is today, but 17 is a lot. Get below sometimes years below 50 CFS. So that is a lot of water. Having said that, when it got lower, this is an engineer. Somebody, how many weeks it takes for the water to come from the Chewuch ditch to the river? That was a concern. It's the question. If we irrigate, as the Chewuch is, it can irrigate legally until October 1st. And let's say it takes 6 weeks or whatever. Chewuch. Good question. Don't hear that answer, but it was a concern. And actually,
Yeah, I think this was a little bit of a sponge comment. When I spoke before, understand that there's leakage from the canal all the way to the river, but also with, higher river levels, there's also more water that gets out of the aquifer, recharges the aquifer. Generally speaking, 17 CFS is significant. Nothing does, like during the irrigation season, nothing does the river more benefit than actually leaving it in, right? Letting those functions happen more naturally. I guess your question, late season after the irrigation season, understood there's probably a lag time benefit there. What exactly that is, it's difficult to quantify and sitting here right now. But certainly there is probably some benefit, but hopefully much of that benefit is offset by the increased storage of the record.
Yeah.
This is a real sticky point that I would encourage somebody to really drill down on that number. It's not a new study. I know the studies were done in the 60s and 70s about the recharge from the ditches earlier than November, but more in even with alfalfa, a lot of the water's going down in September, early September. And the traditional runs of salmon up these rivers were late, came up late. And that recharge was very important to the fish at that time when they're getting this far up the rivers. It's not a new topic, but there doesn't seem to be any new data on that recharge. So I'm curious if that's something anyone wants to entertain doing, like get some measurable data on that recharge, because it seems with all the concern about the fish that could be very important. And the water that you're saving in the piping goes back into the river, but it doesn't stay in the river. It's headed down to the next river, which ultimately heads to the ocean. So when you say 17 CFS, it's almost like there's a dam somewhere. I mean, we know there's dams, but that's getting backed up and staying in the river. That's flowing water going down the river. So I don't know that you're realizing that full 17 CFS in the river at one time.
Well, I guess a lot to unpack there, and, you know, without having data, say,
Exactly.
say anything specifics, I mean, I would say that if 17 CFS is not diverted at the point of diversion, 17 CFS would be available at that point in the river. How it flows down, a lot of factors, whether it's a gaining river, whether it's a losing river. And your point being about, you know, timing and what time is most beneficial to fish. I think we have to talk to the fish biologists to understand, you know, what species are in that river at what time.
Well, last time I checked,
If anyone wants to address that, well, I'm not a fish biologist.
Okay. More to have discussion with engineers and whatnot. Onto that microphone there, Mr. Carlson. Let's talk about concerns about domestic wells and then running when ditches are piped. Got any experience with that?
Yeah, we got a little bit of experience with this. And let me say, I want to address this in general terms. Can be a very specific question, something I can't speak about. And if anyone has individual concerns about their well and their location, happy to have a sidebar conversation with you about that. But again, if you'd like to talk about more specifics there, just not generalities. But typically speaking, the water supply wells in the valley withdraw from aquifers. So if you're in the Chewuch Valley, typically it's the alluvial, maybe with glacier, deeper glacial aquifers. Yeah. Superficial for several reasons. One, typically you want to drink shallow water. That's it. You know, high continuity is the term that we use with either the ditch or surface water. There's pathogens in there. There are regulations that the Washington State Department of Ecology has an extra standards of well completion that require a certain amount of surface seal. So you bypass the superficial water. Many times there's well casing that extends beyond that. So, you know, wells around here typically withdraw from glacial aquifers. The Chewuch itself, the glacial, as you get out of the valley, kind of make your traverse over the uplands towards Pearrygin Lake, you get more of the sandstones there. Those wells are very deep, you know, typically hundreds of feet deep. Those wells there are typical of a lot of other domestic wells in the area. Line here experience the same problems. I would say that, you know, typically speaking, water supply wells don't receive direct recharge from, let's say, the ditches. Certainly, there could be sites or individual examples of that. Happy to talk about it, but typically that shouldn't be a concern. I have reviewed briefly a couple of well logs, you know, along the trend section of Chewuch Canal. And, you know, these were the trends we saw. Either it's a Louis aquifer that's below, you know, river level, that is in kind of a bigger bathtub of water. It doesn't receive direct recharge for Chewuch, or it's in sandstones. Happy to talk about any other well specific.
I'm a fish biologist, so I can respond to something. It's being built.
That'd be great.
Come on up.
Come on up. Here's my, grab a microphone.
My name is John Crandall. I've been working on the rivers here for about 20 years. For the Chewuch, a lot to understand with the water and the fish. One way to think about it is what the life history of the fish is in relation to the time of the year. So when are the fish spawning? What month, what weeks does that occur? And we have different species. So when we talk about fish, it's not just one species that we're talking about. We have 3 listed under the federal ESA in the Chewuch, spring Chinook salmon, summer steelhead, and trout. Those are 3 listed. We have other imperial species that are Pacific lamprey, and then we have lots of other fish that are in there. So part of understanding what this particular project and what 17 CFS means is understanding and paying attention to the life history of those various species and the timing of when this water will be available. 17 CFS in relation to like the May flow in the Chewuch is a very small percentage. When you take that into August and September, it becomes, as Craig was talking about, a very significant chunk. Today, it's about 30% based on today's flow at the gauge right over here. The flow that we see on the USGS gauge is not the true flow in the Chewuch. That's telling you what's in the Chewuch after all the water's been diverted by 3 different main stem ditches. So we got Skyline, Chewuch, Fulton, but then you're also taking water out of 8 Mile Creek as well. So there's a lot of water being diverted. That's what the USGS gauge during the irrigation season is going to tell you. It's kind of what's left after all the irrigation has been through. So when you bring that in, looking at how 17 CFS, it really gets to some of the other things that were brought up, how fish are able to move through riffles that get shallow. So 17 CFS bumps those up to change the depth and the velocity profiles of the river. So that could potentially increase spawning habitat for fish that are spawning when this 17 CFS would be available. Like right now, when spring Chinook are spawning. But steelhead, this is not gonna, for steelhead spawning, this project doesn't really do much at all because they spawn in May. So that's not a significant chunk. So I think taking a look at the life history of the fish and the timing of that is really important. And to me, one of the best things we can be doing in terms of restoring the fish populations is doing our best to restore a natural hydrograph to the river. So that's making the river flow as nature intended it to, and trying to mimic that as closely as possible, given all the other controls and constraints. This project doesn't apply to that. Hey, Joe, what's happening with efficiency? All sorts of stuff. So in September and October, the Chewuch generally hits its lowest flow of the year at the USGS gauge in late September or during the winter season, like January, February, generally when the river will hit its lowest point. There's a noticeable bump on October 1st most years when some of the irrigation shuts off. If you look at that USGS gauge, it goes up about 15 CFS or 20 CFS depending on what's shut off. September, October, what you have going on is for steelhead that spawn in the spring, those young fish are in the river, what we call rearing. They're just growing up, right? They'll be there for 3 years. So you have 3 different year classes of steelhead all in the river during that period. For spring Chinook, you have incubation. So those eggs are getting laid right now, today, over the next couple of weeks. And through September, October, those eggs are now in the gravel. And they will be till next spring. Then they'll hatch and emerge. Those fish will hang out. So we also have last year's young in the river right now. So we have young salmon that are waiting to go to the ocean, right? And then for bull trout, they use a little. This is about an 8 project. They use that. There's really no rearing going on. They use it to migrate down. They spawn the stream. So it's not a big deal for them. They just need abundant water to get up the river and not have trouble. Also, there's other stuff we could kind of go on that still. Yep. Hope that helps.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
In the experience of folks who have been through ditch piping projects where there's been a well or two affected, is there any follow through with property owners affected? Thinking wells?
Good question. Good question. Could you quickly repeat or restate the question for Niels? Okay.
Everybody gets a turn on this today. I was just asking if there's ever follow-up with people who have impacts to their wells for piping projects. If anybody follows up to help them dig a deeper well or compensate them.
I'll let Casey finish the answer to it, but what I can say is those 15 years or so that we did was actually did we measured the static water. Measured it before the ditch turned off and measured it after the ditch turned off or during the summer. All of that to try and get an idea of how much we get affected. And his, I can particularly remember, we did affect. And there again, talking about different laws, we should talk about this from the but Chewuch Village, where it comes up to Pearrygin, it swings back toward the airport. We did monitor that, and we, for those people that affected the most, personally for them and us, it did affect them. So if they didn't change the water.
That's an excellent point. Maybe we should clarify a little bit. What do we consider a problem versus just an fact? Is, say you have a well 150 feet and water levels 20 feet, and depending on the well construction details, that means you have 80 feet of water available in your well. Well, your pump might only be set at 30 feet. If your pump's set at 30 feet and because of the piping or any other reason, your water level goes down 5 feet, that means you have 5 feet less available drawdown in your well. That may or may not be a problem depending on the pump set. Your pump set really shallow. Well, depending on how far your well draws down when that pump cycles off and off, it could start maybe sucking a little bit of air. But an easy remedy to that is, setting the pump a little bit deeper. So the way we think about the significance of the impacts is the amount of available drawdown you have in the well, which is measured from basically where your pump is set on the total depth of your well versus your static one. And to monitor that, and depending on what the outcome is, the worst case scenario is the well dries up, right? The well dries up, or you have so very little available drawdown. I think that's the worst case scenario. Probably not based on my experience. Be interested to see what people are doing have as far as. So let me pose a question to you. Was there any replacement wells required previous piping?
Online is what environmental analyses have been done as far as potential impacts from this project, or are there any planned?
None have been done yet, other than the studies that we have referred to for the seepage, I would say that any project of this nature requires the SEPA. So those will be the importance.
All right, last one on the list here is concerned that additional in-stream flow subsidizes junior water rights in YR 48, allows Bureau of Reclamation to discharge additional water from Wells Pool, and possibly subsidizes any junior water right hold all the way down to the Pacific Ocean. That's just a little bit to unpack. Go right ahead. You're up.
Yeah, the short answer is I don't know. So I was just looking up because when I read that a few days ago, I wasn't even sure what to do with it then, and I've been thinking about it since, and then I realized I should have. So is there a year-round minimum in-stream flow on the Chewuch? I should know this, but I was just looking it up. Do you know, Tyson? Is there a rule?
Yes.
Is it year-round?
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, so I believe, I don't know for sure, but I believe this may be the first time that we would have this big of a trust water right on a small enough system to where that, the ability to regulate is beyond the error bar. I will go back and ask this question. So we have a lot of homework to do because, there have been posed questions about if you add enough trust water right to a river, could you potentially add that amount of water to the flow to say at which point you would regulate juniors? So we would, do you tack that onto the minimum stream flow? Well, we've never had enough water that was beyond the error bar in a small enough system to even contemplate that. So I don't know the answer. I mean, essentially you would look at, here's the circumstances under which we would regulate in the past. And we need to look at where are those points of diversion? How big are they? What are the priority dates? So that's part of the analysis to say, okay, in this condition, what does a water master do? Part of the struggle though is what Tyson already brought up, which is just because you put 17 CFS in the Chewuch, it's not a pipe. It has losing and gaining reaches that maybe there's studies out there and we know what those are. But it's real hard to say if you put water at the top of the, where the piping project is supplying those seepage losses back to the river. Where at which can we say those are for sure there and you can't take them? So it's a huge challenge in terms of regulation, and that would of course be in conjunction with our water master looking at what can legally be taken, and then making sure obviously that there are no illegal uses first and foremost, and then trying to decide what the juniors are legally entitled to. Now, the Wells Pool piece, I don't even know how to, please.
You gotta volunteer.
So just a clarification about the Wells Pool and Bureau of Reclamation. So as I think everyone knows, the Wells Pool is the Columbia River from Wells Dam upstream to Chief Joseph Dam. And it's, partly created by the impoundment at the Wells Dam. And the elevation of Wells Pool is affected by operation of Wells Dam based on, Douglas PUD's FERC license and their instantaneous power demands that, drive the pool. Because, you see the pool elevation go up and down, and that's based on operations and generation at the Wells facility within Douglas PUD's FERC license. The Bureau of Reclamation operates and manages Grand Coulee Dam, which is upstream of Chief Joseph Dam. The Columbia Basin project is, water from Lake Roosevelt. So that's where reclamation diverts water for the basin. And reclamation diverts water pursuant to state issued water rights. But the Wells elevation is, reclamation doesn't have anything to do with that. And generally speaking, the Wells Pool elevation isn't affected by water withdrawals in any meaningful way. Wells Pool elevation is affected by operations project pursuant to power demand within the terms of the FERC license that WSP operates. So hopefully that clarifies kind of the nexus between the well project and water use. So no reclamation nexus to the
I'll take my turn at this question too, just because it's interesting. To address the question about in-stream flow subsidized stream water into water 40. I think it's important to remember what flavor of water we're talking about. We're talking about non-consumptive. This isn't consumptive water. During the trust transfer, there are different leaches defined as such. This non-consumptive water, it's leakage from the canal back to the river. Say, just for the sake of simplicity, all that leakage returns back to the river by the confluence of Chewuch. That's how we're here. From that point on, river feels no different, right? The benefit, the increased flow is only in the Chewuch for the point of diversion. So past the confluence, there will be no additional water in the river because it will already, now maybe the timing might be something, but essentially there's no additional water in the river. I think that the challenge comes in defining on how the water is quantified, how that trust water right is managed, as Kelsey is alluding to, into Chewuch itself. And, I think of previous projects Kelsey and I have worked on together to learn, the trick is to quantify. It starts out in 17 CFS, it might go down to 15 CFS, maybe by the confluence, it's 10 CFS. I mean, those are judgment calls and calculations that are completed trust transfer. But the one important thing to remember is, in order to establish a trust water right, it's written in statute that it cannot cause impairment to senior water rights. So senior water rights will be left whole, or it's just in period. So it's all like, no impairment period. So all water rights should still enjoy the same benefit, the same frequency, the same water.
All right, open to the floor. Any other questions? Thoughts?
Where are you on funding?
Where are we on funding? Jordana? Take a shot.
Then before we are in this planning phase, and that phase has been funded by the Washington State Conservation Commission's Irrigation Efficiencies Grant Program. And we are applying for that again. That is something that needs to be approved by legislature and by the Washington State Conservation Commission. Right now, they seem to be on board. We need to finish getting that design and get that done. And as Chuck has mentioned before, there is also possibly funding from his neck of the woods, and I'd like to talk about that.
Sure. So as I mentioned, I've been Colville Tribes Fish and Wildlife Program for about 15 and a half years. And during that time, I've been involved in a number of irrigation efficiencies projects over in the Okanogan subbasin, Okanogan Irrigation District, Helensdale Reclamation District outside of Lot. We've done some work. Actually, we were a cost-share partner. We contributed about $2 million to the MBID Barclay project. We just contributed $3.4 million to an irrigation efficiencies and piping project down Bicycle, the Cascade Portrait Irrigation Company project, which put at least for one, by moving a point of diversion downstream, there is a reach of Bicycle Creek, tributary to Wenatchee, that benefits by 11.9 CFS. So pretty significant amount of water in an important biological reach of Bicycle, which is tributary to the Wenatchee. But Colville has a suite of fish and wildlife projects funded through integrated Bonneville Power Administration. We have a specific project that is a land and water conservation and acquisition project. We used that land and water conservation and acquisition project funding to contribute to ensure Barclay was a different use of habitat project that contributed to that. But the Cascade Orchard Irrigation Company project that the tribe contributed $3.4 million That was our land and water conservation and acquisition project. So in any event, long story short, Colville, in our fish and wildlife program, seeks to restore aquatic ecosystems for the benefit of listed and non-listed fish and aquatic life. We have funding to support projects. And like I said, when we get involved with the project, we want to make sure that there's benefit for fish. Those are the strings that come with the funding. Bonneville doesn't necessarily fund these projects out of the goodness of their heart, but they fund these projects with ratepayer dollars because they have legal mitigation obligations to offset and mitigate the fish that they kill by operating the Columbia River hydro system. So we are with them implementing projects to benefit fish with a specific focus on ESA listed fish. And thank you, John, for providing the context about species that potentially would benefit from this project. I'll just point out as a parting thought that there are 2 endangered species of salmon in the Columbia Basin. One of those is Upper Columbia spring chinook. The other is Snake River sockeye. So the other listed fish in the Columbia Basin are listed as threatened. So that distinction relates to extinction risk. So an endangered species has a higher extinction risk than a threatened species. And this isn't to say that spring chinook are more important than steelhead, that are more important than lamprey, but in terms of just extinction risk in the Columbia River Basin, spring chinook, Upper Columbia spring chinook, are one of the species in the Columbia River Basin at the highest level of extinction risk. And as John described, this project would directly benefit, if it has anticipated benefits that we discussed here, would benefit spring chinook given their life history.
So does that link with funding and habitat fish benefit? Does that mean that there's a monitoring program that's going to be implemented to kind of make sure that your funding has improved habitat, or how does that, or is there just sort of an implied or unassumed benefit?
Yeah. So let me see if I can summarize the question and let me know if I got it right. Given that we're proposing to take funding that has specific purposes intended or strings attached, this funding is meant to improve habitat conditions for endangered species, that listed salmonids or species. Is there a mechanism by which to monitor the effect of implementation of these projects to make sure that the project is actually benefiting the species of interest? Boy, I want to talk about a complicated question about the link between implementation of the project and results and resulting effects on populations. I guess I'll just briefly say that habitat improvement project effects and population status, effects resulting from those habitat improvement projects are nonlinear and multivariate and difficult to detect from a scientific standpoint. And then I'll also say that depending on the funder, there are different types of fish monitoring and habitat status and trend monitoring and modeling that occurs across the Columbia River Basin. In terms of project effectiveness or project effectiveness, the Bonneville Power Administration has a effectiveness monitoring project. Scientists debate whether or not that's actually an effective way to assess the effect of habitat implementation projects, but there are ongoing habitat status and trend and fish population monitoring projects throughout the Columbia River Basin in the Methow Valley. Typically, funders who fund implementation of a habitat project don't necessarily want to fund monitoring to assess project effectiveness. They want to monitor, or they want to fund additional habitat implementation projects to make things better, relying on kind of the state of the science and the scientific literature to from a mechanistic standpoint, implement projects that we know address limiting factors as the science, explains it to us. So I see that,
That's a great answer.
that's a, I
No,
tried to
really,
be concise, but yeah. Hopefully that.
Yeah.
Question.
Okay, any other questions from the audience? I've got one. So online, they said that studies show that piping exacerbates droughts. Is there concerns about that? And kind of secondary to that is, would the detriments of piping outweigh the benefits over time? No idea who wants to take a shot at that. Don't everybody raise your hand at once. Want me to repeat it again? Yeah. Well, let me see if I can reword it here a little bit. So they're saying that they have studies or they've read studies and show that piping exacerbates droughts, makes them worse.
It's connected with the drought.
And I don't even, I'm reading what was anybody, so. How about this? Are there any concerns that piping the ditch may exacerbate drought conditions? I'm guessing in the river.
Wouldn't exacerbate the drought condition in the river. 17C. So that's my first kind of be able to answer that question. As far as exacerbating the drought to the shareholders, it wouldn't, because we're still supplying them with water they need for their irrigation purposes, as long as the river has to be dry.
If you already have it. Well,
That's quite true. That's quite true. That strip, that 50-foot easement, will not have direct water to it, but it does have potential to have water to it. So it's hard to say that it's all suddenly dry in the other part of it. And even if you go down to the Barkley, yes, they took a lot of trees down, but if you notice, some of those cottonwoods have found a source of water, whether it's from springs or whatever. When they did Bluff Street in town here, they took out a lot of trees. That's basically Bluff Street. It's all my property on both sides, and they took a lot of cottonwoods. Probably a dozen cottonwoods. I'd say 6 or 7 of them are back and they're probably 20 feet high. They found their own thing. Does that mean that's going to happen? No. Does it mean there's going to be no impact on the 50-foot easement? Absolutely not. There's going to be an impact. What we're trying to do is minimize the impact as best we can and still save the water and get the efficiency that we're looking for with supplying irrigation water.
Just add one thing in terms of drought resilience, and as Megan, described, climate resilience and projected impacts on, water resources throughout the Columbia River Basin resulting climate change. Quite contrary to exacerbating drought conditions for water users and for fish, efficiency projects, in my experience, guarantees and improves agricultural reliability, because you're not losing a bunch of water in the ditch. In times of scarcity, when there's just not water in the river, we get what nature provides, right? We get what the snowpack provides. We get what all the clouds by way of rain, and we've all experienced increasing drought severity and frequency. And so, if we can improve conveyance efficiency, that, in my experience from other projects, increases reliability for water availability for water users. And to the extent that there's additional water that is protected in stream, make sure that stream is that water is in stream for fish at the time of year when they need it. And so certainly in context of other projects, one of the benefits that water users, irrigation districts, irrigators have, part of what has brought them to the table, one of the benefits that they have derived from these projects that we have funded, the reason they worked with us to implement these projects is they see a benefit in terms of additional agricultural water reliability. Because there isn't water that is lost to the system through seepage.
Thank you. All right, Casey or Jordana, who wants to talk about next steps and what's gonna happen after tonight?
Well, we are still in the information gathering stage, as we mentioned before. So the next steps right now are to get a design from the engineers. Right now, we have the survey company that we hired doing the mapping, topographical and easement mapping to make sure that the actual location with the ditch matches up with the easements. Then we need to also plan out where our access points are going to be and staging locations are going to be and determine easements for those locations. We also need to meet with each individual landowner that will be going through and have an on-site discussion with them about what impacts are coming and what is important to them and how the rehabilitation of that site will look. We need to also get that final design and get the funding. Did I miss anything? Yep. That's about it. So I really appreciate everybody coming tonight, all the thoughtful questions, the thoughtful concerns, and it helps us to make sure that we're on the right track to do this correctly. And if you have any additional questions or concerns after tonight, please email me, Jordana at okanogancd.org, or give me a call. And I would love to have a conversation or to just listen to your concerns or to try to find the answers to your questions. So with that, yeah. Oh, yes, and on your way out, please sign up for our newsletter to get quarterly updates on all of our projects, not just this big project. And also please eat some food. Anything else?
That's it.
All right,
Thank you all for coming.
thank you.